Alright everyone, there's an interesting article, link in the description that, I agree with parts of it at least. Tends to be the case with some legacy media articles. It's really well written if 50% of the content is true at this point, so we'll be tongue-in-cheek about that. A third-party candidate in 2024. Now this particular article is focusing on the likelihood of a Trump versus Biden matchup, if they are the candidates. Trump's in-party support remains rather high. But there is the anti-MAGA segment of the GOP, and many more independent voters, by the way, now than a few years ago. The number of independent voters in the country rose by double digits over the last half-decade. Then you have Biden. Biden's got extremely low in-party support. Most Democrats do not want him to run again. With Trump, he fares better. He's running 10 points ahead of Biden in that particular in-party metric. Biden is legendarily unpopular among Democrats for the purposes of re-election specifically. Number one. Number two, he's ancient. He's approaching his mid-80s at this point. That is fairly old for a chief executive, unless you're in a third world country. Not to shit on anyone who's on the older side. That doesn't even mean anything. I don't even care. But he's got cognitive decline. It tends to overlap with people getting older. Their cognitive skills decline. With Biden, he has Alzheimer's disease. He's quite clearly not entirely there. It is advancing. We have seen this over the last couple of years, and there are still people pretending that's not the case. I already see the sharks circling on the Dem side. On the Republican side, Donald Trump doesn't have a competitor. John Bolton, who gets completely ignored in his existence entirely, and Nikki Haley are the only ones jumping in at the moment. Not a very crowded field. Buttigieg, meanwhile, who is a viable potential primary candidate, has already signaled that he's not going to run for an empty Senate slot, and I don't think it's because he expects Biden to run again and therefore to maintain his job. The sharks are already circling as well around Kamala. You've seen some snarky comments by Elizabeth Warren and certain others. Sometimes they even reveal their identities. Those are actually reliable, by the way, those particular unnamed sources on Capitol Hill. Kamala's not well liked either. In fact, she drags Biden down by her mere presence, which is hilarious. This article effectively claims that if Trump v. Biden occurs, there will be a third-party candidate that will rise up into the national consciousness, and as a spoiler candidate, obviously, but will be, something like beyond what Gary Johnson achieved or whatever. Could be a Green Partyist gobbling up the left. It could be a libertarian. It could be an independent run by someone who's independently wealthy. Bloomberg says, fuck it, says, one last huzzah, or something like that. But the fact is you're going to get a third-party candidate anyway with greater viability than in the past, regardless of who the candidates are, even if they're fairly well-liked. Because there are less partisans. There are more independent voters. At the end of the day, most of them vote tactically, so they don't like either candidate, but they're like, I hate this one worse. I'd prefer the one that's a little bit less sleazy. And that's how a lot of people vote, which can or cannot be wise depending on what socio-political situation you're in at the time. What things are actually conceived of as important? Well, if it's taxes, candidate A will give you a little more relief. But candidate B is the only one that's not attacking the Second Amendment, and you like guns, so then you have to weigh your options accordingly. Third parties in the United States typically have not done particularly well. The most recent kind of sort of viability you saw was Gary Johnson managing to pull in 4 or 5% in half a dozen states. That was back in 2016. I think that a third party will rise up to at least that degree of prominence in the upcoming election regardless. I don't think that it matters. This article says, well, it's because Trump v. Biden. Biden's not likely to be the candidate. Trump is likely to be the GOP candidate. Again, currently in the field, it is effectively just Donald Trump. Even if DeSantis gets in, it is advantage Trump. He's still running 10 points ahead in all of the polling for the most part. DeSantis, once he gets on a debate stage, I think that would be his only moment to shine. What we've seen is that those don't move the metric as much as they might have back in the TV era over the last few elections. These days it's more about one-liners and memes, and I think that Trump still has the advantage. Assuming that the networks bothered to cover it at all, and probably try to cover it up if Trump did halfway decent. But let's say Trump loses in the primary. Let's say it is DeSantis. Let's say you get Buttigieg v. DeSantis. I still think a third party will rise to prominence. DeSantis will still get castigated as an extremist. Buttigieg would still get mocked for being adjacent to Biden, and for literally having almost no experience. He's been a transport secretary and a two-term mayor of Nowheresville. South Bend, really, really funny how the memetics line up with poor Buttigieg. I don't think that a lot of people would feel positively strong about either candidate. I think there would be a lot of independent voters that would be like, no. Oh, look, it's like 2012 all over again. A couple of morons here, because they've been primed to believe that DeSantis is evil, despite the fact that he's done a reasonably good job as the Florida governor. They've been led to believe that Buttigieg is off his rocker far left. In the id poll category, he pretends just like all the other white neoliberals. Really, though, he's a standard corporate crook-style Democrat. You could have a Gavin Newsom run. You could, oddly enough, you could have a Whitmer run. They've been floating other names too. And in the GOP, Christie might be a throwaway candidate. He's got no viability. You might get Mike Pence in there. The irony is that Mike Pence would be in third place, just behind DeSantis. So, yes, it would be an interesting race. By the way, I think that in a packed field, Trump stomps everyone else out of existence, because the anti-Trump vote would be split. The pro-Trump vote won't be split no matter how many people get into the field. 40% of the party is solidly behind him. That gets him pretty close to the measure that he needs to be at, even in a three-way race. Just to be clear about the dynamics of electoral politics at the primary level. Biden would have less trouble, ultimately, if he chooses to run, simply because he's got the full incumbency. And a lot of Democrats, hate to tell you, will simply maintain course. They'll say, well, I'm not really that happy about Joe Biden. I don't feel very excited or confident in him. But look at those Republicans over there. They're so much worse. You can almost see it coming. It's almost like it's scripted. Yeah, so third-party candidate, absolutely. But I think that's inevitable. I think that it doesn't matter who the candidates are for the two mainline parties. It doesn't matter because there are plenty of independent voters now. You'd have to get someone who is particularly really great, and I don't see anyone lining up. I prefer Trump. I think that he'd do a good job, but let's face it, in the candidacy sense right now, he's having some problems. I don't see anyone who's going to run like a spit-shined Obama 08 style campaign. I think, I can't see anyone in the field or potential fields that would tick that mark. Buttigieg might come close enough to get him over the hurdles in a primary, even against his former boss, potentially. On the GOP side, I don't see anyone who can oust Trump from his position, his poll position. So, yeah, you're going to get a third-party candidate in 2024, but it really doesn't matter who the other candidates are. And for people saying, well, it's going to be a third-party libertarian candidate that's going to cause Trump to lose by siphoning off conservative votes. Well, you could just as easily see someone nail the Dems from the far left. They've already been doing this in a bunch of states. Why do you think AOC has a job that doesn't involve bartending? That's about all. Peace out.